The 80s created some of the boldest fragrances ever made, but most of them didn't survive untouched. Ingredients changed, regulations changed, formulas changed. Yet somehow, a few legends are still shockingly close to the originals. And not every classic deserves your money today. Here are 7 perfumes that kept their 80s soul, and 3 to avoid. Number 1 on the list of fragrances to avoid has been sold to American consumers for decades as the definitive Eastern-inspired powerhouse. And fragrance critics and longtime wearers have been saying for years that what is inside the bottle today bears only a passing resemblance to what built that name into a cultural landmark. And number 1 on the list of fragrances still worth buying has outlasted 2 world wars, survived multiple changes in ownership, and remains the single most counterfeited perfume on Earth, which tells you everything you need to know about what it still delivers. Here are 7 that actually made it through the decades still carrying their original character. Before we start, hit subscribe, because what you're about to learn changes the way you buy forever. Let's count them down. Number 7 is Guy Laroche Drakkar Noir, and yes, the internet calls it dated. That is not the same thing as wrong. Launched in 1982 with perfumer Pierre Wagner, Drakkar Noir built its reputation on a combination of lavender, artemisia, and woody musks, what the fragrance world classifies as a fougere that was simultaneously sharp, clean, and completely clear about what it was. Fragrantica community reviews, drawn from thousands of wearers, comparing current and vintage batches, consistently rate them as remarkably close in character, which is notable given how aggressively reformulated most of its 1980s contemporaries have been. You can find it at major US retailers and discount chains for $25 to $35. Every modern barbershop-inspired fragrance, currently charging $120, is trying to do what Drakkar Noir has been doing since before most of its customers were born. Number 6 is Elizabeth Arden Red Door, and it has no interest in your opinion of it. Launched in 1989, it was built around an arrangement of rose, ylang-ylang, jasmine, and red tulip, designed to be loud, and has remained that way without apology for over 35 years. In a fragrance market that has spent the better part of 2 decades rewarding quiet, skin-close, airy compositions, Red Door occupies its own territory with complete indifference to the trend. The Fragrantica community consistently notes that older and current reviews describe the same dense, unapologetic floral character, which is a consistency most fragrances of this age cannot claim. It is available at American drug chains and discount retailers for $25 to $40. No modern release at this price point is delivering this much presence, and most of the releases charging 3 times more are not either. Number 5 is Giorgio Beverly Hills, and if you know the story, you know that certain Los Angeles restaurants and hotels allegedly posted signs in the mid-80s asking patrons not to wear it. That is not a mark against it. That is a data point about what it does. Launched in 1981, built on tuberose, gardenia, and a dense mossy base that gives it a weight. Modern florals consistently fail to replicate. Giorgio still behaves the way it always did. The Fragrantica community has documented across multiple batch comparisons that current formulations remain structurally faithful to the original profile, a rarity for a fragrance of this age and this level of commercial distribution. It is available through US retailers and online, well under $50. If you have ever described a fragrance as glamorous and meant it as a compliment, this fragrance has been waiting for you to find it again. Number 4 is Dior Poison, and Dior built this one to be dangerous. Launched in 1985 around tuberose, plum, opoponax, and a wall of spice, Poison was reportedly described internally during development as the forbidden fragrance, something the house both feared and committed to fully. IFRA restrictions have softened some of its sharpest edges in subsequent decades, and the current formula has been cleaned up in places. But Dior's approach to Poison has been notably conservative, compared to the full identity overhauls that turned other 80s Orientals into something unrecognizable. The bass notes community regularly cites current Poison as one of the more faithful survivors in the 80s Oriental category. At US prices, typically between $50 and $70, it is still the fragrance that walks into the room first and explains itself later, if it bothers to explain itself at all. Number 3 is Calvin Klein Obsession for Men, and there is a reason department store fragrance counters have been stocking it continuously since 1986. Perfumer Jean Guichard built it on vanilla, amber, oak moss, and civet, a combination that the fragrance press at the time called aggressively sensual, which was accurate. Base Notes reviewers who own both vintage and current bottles report consistently that while projection has been dialed back from its original wall, penetrating intensity, the character, the warmth, the depth, the specific kind of masculine gravity that the industry largely stopped making after 1995, remains intact in the current formula. At common US discount prices between $30 and $50, and frequently lower at TJ Maxx, Ross, and outlet stores, it is one of the strongest value propositions in American men's fragrance. Nothing at this price point is trying this hard. Number 2 is Estée Lauder Beautiful. And if this is the fragrance your mother wore, or the one you associate with a specific version of what American femininity looked like in the mid-80s, that is not a sentimental detour. That association is the entire point. Launched in 1985, and built around a composition of over 150 florals, rose, jasmine, lily, marigold, tuberose, Beautiful was designed to feel like a full bouquet rather than a suggestion of one. Estée Lauder has maintained the formula with a consistency that fragrance critics have noted is unusual for a mass-market house operating at this scale. It remains one of the top-selling American department store fragrances of all time, according to retail sales tracking. Available at most US department stores for between $55 and $75. If you want to smell like the woman who had her life completely together in 1987, that observation is not an insult. Number 1 is Chanel No. 5 Eau de Parfum, and every sentence written about it for the past century has been correct. The Eau de Parfum concentration was introduced in 1986 and represents the most accessible modern entry point into a formula first composed in 1921 by Ernest Beau for Gabrielle Chanel, a formula that used synthetic aldehydes in a concentration that had never been attempted before, and created something that smelled, as Beau's reportedly described it, like a woman, not like flowers. Yes, Chanel has adjusted materials over the decades. Aldehydes have been refined. Some naturals have been substituted under IFRA guidance. But Chanel's legal and quality infrastructure is famously resistant to the kind of wholesale reformulation that gutted other classics, and Luca Turin and Tanya Sanchez, in their reference text. Perfumes, the guide, describe the Eau de Parfum as the most faithful modern carrier of the original character available at retail. At US prices of around $100 to $130 for a standard bottle, it is not the most affordable option on this list. It is, however, the most counterfeited fragrance on the planet. That fact alone tells you what it is still worth. But what about the ones you need to avoid? Number 3 is Guerlain Samsara, and this one requires some honesty about what it actually promised. Guerlain launched Samsara in 1989 and built the entire identity of the fragrance around one ingredient, Mysore sandalwood, from the Karnataka region of India. Dense, milky, almost meditative. It was the kind of wood note that did not sit on your skin so much as emerge from it. Perfume critics described it as one of the great sandalwood compositions of the 20th century, and that reputation still follows the bottle onto department store shelves today. Here is what changed. Mysore sandalwood became one of the most restricted raw materials in modern perfumery. The International Fragrance Association, known in the industry as IFRA, progressively tightened usage limits across multiple revision cycles, and the specific Mysore variety became commercially unsustainable as Indian government restrictions on harvesting drove supply to a near standstill. The website, Raiders of the Lost Scent, documented this in their 2026 comparison of vintage and modern Samsara, describing the current version as notably brighter and thinner than the original, with the defining creaminess largely absent. What replaced Mysore sandalwood are synthetic molecules, javanol, polysantol, javanol derivatives, which are technically sandalwood adjacent, but carry none of the gravity that made the original irreplaceable. If you're in your 50s and Samsara is the fragrance someone important in your life wore, a mother, a partner, a woman whose presence you still associate with that particular warmth, the current bottle is not going to give you that back. The base notes and fragrantica communities, both heavily populated by experienced wearers, return a consistent verdict. It is still a good perfume. It is not the same perfume. Number 2 is Dior Fahrenheit, and this one will absolutely start arguments. Fahrenheit launched in 1988 and did something no men's fragrance had done before. It combined violet leaf with a note that reviewers universally described as petrol, an actual gasoline accord, wrapped in leather and warm sandalwood. It smelled like nothing else on the market. It still does not smell like anything else on the market. The argument is about how much of the original experience survives. Open a current bottle of Fahrenheit and you will recognize it immediately. The architecture is intact. What longtime users report consistently across base notes threads, fragrantica reviews, and YouTube fragrance commentary that reaches tens of thousands of viewers in the enthusiast space is significantly reduced projection and a softened version of the opening shock factor that made original Fahrenheit genuinely strange and genuinely polarizing. Violet leaf is subject to IFRA restrictions, and certain musks used in the original formula have been phased out under European Union cosmetic regulations, which Dior, as a French house, must comply with regardless of where the fragrance is being sold, including every counter in the United States. If you are buying Fahrenheit for the first time, you will likely find it remarkable, because it still is. If you are a man in his 50s who wore the original and has been storing a bottle in the back of a drawer for 15 years, you already know what the comparison feels like when you open both on the same morning. Number 1 is Yves Saint Laurent Opium, and if you wore this in the 80s, you already know what it meant to put it on. The launch in 1977 was controversial enough to generate organized protests outside Bloomingdale's in New York. By the early 80s, Opium had become the defining reference point for Oriental perfumery in America. Dense, dark, resinous, built on a foundation of oak moss spice and materials that were meant to feel almost excessive. That was the point. It was not trying to be subtle. The name survived. The formula did not, at least not in the form that earned it that reputation. Oak moss, one of the foundational naturals in the original composition, was severely restricted by IFRA due to documented allergen concerns, and the material was progressively reduced across multiple reformulation cycles over 2 decades. El País, in a 2025 feature specifically addressing fragrance reformulation, cited Opium as one of the most significant examples of a fragrance identity being transformed by ingredient restrictions rather than by any creative decision. The result is a cleaner, more wearable version that shares a name and a general direction with the original, but has lost the specific heaviness that made it either magnificent or genuinely offensive, depending on who was standing near you in 1984. Opium is at number 1 on this list for a precise reason. Its cultural footprint is enormous. Its emotional associations for people in their 50s are deep, and the gap between what the name promises and what current bottles deliver is wider here than with any other fragrance in this conversation. Handing $65 across a Macy's counter expecting the original experience is not buying the original experience. It is buying a respectful, contemporary tribute to it. The bottle sitting on your shelf right now may not be what you think it is. The fragrance industry does not announce when a formula changes, it just changes.